Distinguished viewers, as Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney steps off his aircraft in Beijing this week, he does so carrying more than diplomatic credentials. He carries the hopes of Saskatchewan canola farmers who have watched their livelihoods suffer under Chinese tariffs. He carries the weight of a nation seeking to reduce its dangerous dependence on a single trading partner. And he carries something else entirely unexpected. He carries the rare distinction of being welcomed by Chinese state media not with suspicion or calculation, but with something approaching genuine respect. This is the first visit by a Canadian Prime Minister to China in 8 years. The timing is not coincidental. The substance is not ceremonial. And the Chinese reaction tells us something important about how the world is watching Canada navigate this remarkable moment in its history. The numbers alone demand attention. Canada and China conducted $118.7 billion in two-way merchandise trade in 2024. Canadian exports to China reached $29.9 billion, while imports totaled $88.8 billion. China stands as Canada's second-largest trading partner. Yet for nearly a decade, this relationship has been frozen, strained, and at times openly hostile. The arrest of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou in 2018 at Washington's request triggered the detention of 2 Canadians on espionage charges. Trade relations deteriorated further when Ottawa followed Biden's lead in imposing 100% tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles in 2024. Beijing retaliated with tariffs on Canadian canola, pork, and seafood. The relationship did not simply cool, it fractured. What makes this week's visit historically significant is not that it happens, but that it happens now, under these precise geopolitical conditions, with this particular Canadian leader. Mark Carney arrived in office less than a year ago, succeeding Justin Trudeau after nearly a decade of liberal governance. But Carney brings something Trudeau never possessed in dealings with China. He brings credibility earned far from Ottawa's political theater. As governor of the Bank of Canada during the 2008 financial crisis, Carney guided the nation through one of the most turbulent economic periods in modern history. His appointment as governor of the Bank of England in 2013 made him the first non-British citizen to hold that position. He steered Britain's central bank through Brexit and the early stages of the COVID pandemic. He served as the United Nations Special Envoy on climate action and finance. This is not a career politician speaking the language of expedience. This is a systems thinker who has managed economies larger than Canada's, who has sat in rooms with the world's most powerful financial leaders, and who understands leverage not as theater, but as architecture. Beijing recognizes this distinction, and it matters. The Chinese response to Carney's visit reveals more through tone than through text. Global Times, the state-run newspaper known for its nationalist edge, published an editorial welcoming the visit as a new starting point. The language was measured but unmistakably positive. The editorial called on Canada to lift what it termed unreasonable tariff restrictions and advance pragmatic cooperation. It described public expectations in Canada as warming up bilateral relations. It noted that Saskatchewan farmers could not wait for this visit to happen soon enough. This is not the language Beijing typically reserves for Western leaders. This is the language of a government that sees an opening. China Daily, another state outlet, framed the visit as an opportunity for Ottawa to repair ties and transform stated commitments into concrete actions. The tone was not triumphant, it was inviting. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning described China as attaching a high importance to the visit. She emphasized that sound and steady development of ties serves common interests and contributes to world peace, development, stability, and prosperity. These are not empty diplomatic pleasantries, they are signals. What Beijing sees in Carney is strategic autonomy. This phrase appears repeatedly in Chinese state media coverage of the visit. Strategic autonomy means a country capable of making decisions based on its own national interest rather than reflexive alignment with a dominant partner. For decades, Canada's foreign policy operated within a framework where alignment with Washington was both inevitable and beneficial. That framework has collapsed. Donald Trump's return to office shattered whatever illusions remained about the reliability of American partnership. Trump imposed tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. He threatened Canada's auto sector. He mused openly about Canada becoming the 51st state of the United States. He launched a military operation in Venezuela, seizing President Nicolas Maduro and bringing him to New York to face charges. He threatened to take Greenland by force if Denmark did not cede it voluntarily. These are not the actions of a predictable ally, managing disputes through established channels. These are the actions of a power operating without restraint, without consistency, and without regard for the sovereignty of nations it once called partners. China watched all of this unfold, and China drew conclusions. Beijing understands that Canada's pivot toward diversification is not ideological. It is survival. Carney has been explicit about this reality. He has stated publicly that Canada must move its economy from reliance to resilience. He has committed to doubling non-American exports over the next decade. He has described the current moment as transforming Canada from an economy dependent on a single trade partner into one that is stronger and more capable of withstanding global shocks. This is not anti-American rhetoric, this is risk management. And Beijing respects risk management because Beijing operates on the same principle. The visit comes with concrete stakes. Saskatchewan canola farmers have suffered enormously under Chinese tariffs. Entire rural communities have felt the economic pain. Canadian pork and seafood exporters face similar pressures. Beijing has indicated it would consider removing these tariffs if Ottawa reconsidered its 100% levy on Chinese electric vehicles. This creates a difficult trade-off. Canada's auto sector is already under severe strain from Trump's protectionism. Allowing Chinese EVs into the Canadian market could accelerate that strain. But the deeper truth is that Trump's tariffs have already battered Canadian automakers. Washington's protectionism has not shielded Canadian workers, it has squeezed them. The question Carney must now answer is whether maintaining alignment with American trade policy serves Canadian interests when that alignment delivers pain without protection. Chinese electric vehicles represent more than a trade dispute. They represent industrial capacity built at a scale and speed no Western nation has matched. China dominates global EV manufacturing, battery supply chains, and the critical minerals required for the energy transition. If Canada limits engagement to importing Chinese vehicles, the economic benefit remains narrow. Lower prices for consumers matter, but they do not create jobs or strengthen industrial capacity. The larger opportunity lies in manufacturing partnerships. If Canada were to host Chinese EV assembly plants or battery production facilities, the economic impact could be transformative. We're talking about tens of thousands of jobs across supply chains, logistics, research, and supporting industries. Canada already possesses the raw materials, the skilled workforce, and the clean energy advantage needed to support EV manufacturing at scale. What it has lacked is diversification of partners. This is where Chinese firms become strategically relevant, and done correctly, with labor standards and environmental safeguards in place. Such partnerships could turn a trade irritant into an industrial strategy. This is the kind of pragmatic thinking of Beijing values. And it is the kind of thinking that requires political courage. There are critics of this approach. Some argue that any warming of ties with Beijing represents a betrayal of Canadian values, or a dangerous naivety about Chinese intentions. These criticisms deserve serious consideration. China's human rights record is abysmal. Its treatment of Uyghurs in Xinjiang, its crackdown on Hong Kong, its suppression of dissent, and its acts of transnational repression are documented and undeniable. Canada must not ignore these realities in pursuit of economic gain. Carney has stated that he will raise human rights concerns during his meetings with Chinese officials. Whether those concerns translate into meaningful outcomes remains to be seen. But the alternative, complete disengagement, does not serve Canadian interests either. Disengagement does not improve human rights in China. It does not protect Canadian sovereignty. It does not create jobs or stabilize supply chains. What it does is leave Canada more dependent on a United States that has proven itself unreliable under Trump's leadership. This is the cruel irony facing middle powers like Canada in today's geopolitical environment. The choice is not between a perfect partner and an imperfect one. The choice is between managing relationships with multiple imperfect partners or remaining dangerously dependent on one. Carney understands this. His career in central banking taught him that optionality is sovereignty. Having multiple counterparties reduces vulnerability. It creates space for independent decision-making. It allows a country to say no without fear of total economic collapse. Mark Carney's visit to China this week is historic not because it solves every problem, but because it acknowledges reality. The world has changed. Power has shifted. Old certainties have collapsed. And Canada is adapting, not with grand pronouncements or ideological fervor, but with pragmatic calculation and quiet determination. Chinese state media is praising Carney not because he's weak, but because he is serious. Beijing sees in him a leader who understands that sovereignty requires options, that resilience requires diversification, and that survival in a fragmenting world requires the courage to act independently. This trip is not about choosing sides. It is about making sure Canada always has one. Success from this visit will be measured not in dramatic announcements, but in structural improvements, reopening dialogue channels, reducing unpredictability, creating space for Canadian farmers and businesses to operate without fear of sudden retaliation, building options without creating new dependencies. These are quiet victories, but they are the ones that matter. That is the most Canadian response imaginable, calm, measured, and absolutely resolute. This is Canada navigating a dangerous world with the tools it has always possessed: intelligence, pragmatism, and an unwillingness to be bullied. Thank you for watching.